Good day. Deconstructing takes skill and a love of that which you are deconstructing. Parody takes a good sense of humor and a deep love of that which you are parodying. Mating the two concepts takes an even greater level of skill, and you need to still craft a good story that stands on its own despite the deconstructed and parodic elements. In the current year, writers love to deconstruct, man, the epic fantasy genre, with all the cardboard cutouts instead of characters. With stories and settings so generic, even AI would find them derivative. The concept of deconstructing fantasy tropes is nothing new, and writers were doing it 30 or 40 years ago and probably decades before that. It's nothing special to take tropes and then make them edgy, man, like where the hero is really evil. It's funny to think that Warhammer Fantasy was supposed to be dark. Warhammer Fantasy was a setting created by Games Workshop way back in the midst of history in those far-off golden days of the 1980s. The Warhammer setting in the current year would long be superseded by the rather pedestrian setting of Warhammer 40k. So here's how it went. GW created Warhammer Fantasy and then created a sci-fi spin-off called Warhammer 40k. The big difference between Warhammer 40k and Warhammer Fantasy is the tone. Warhammer Fantasy was a complex setting with numerous complex characters, with numerous factions, each with certain levels of darkness. 40k, by contrast, was a super dark setting where 10,000 people were sacrificed every day to keep the immortal God Emperor alive. One was dark, one was edgy, man. Still, I love 40k, but love Warhammer Fantasy even more due to its higher complexity in terms of storytelling. If you haven't seen my other Warhammer Fantasy videos, here's a quick recap of what Warhammer Fantasy is. Warhammer Fantasy takes place on one planet where there are humans, elves, dwarves, dark elves, chaos dwarfs, orcs with a C and not a K, and chaos. Chaos is much the same as 40k. You got the four dark gods, they invade the world through two polar gates, and the humans' main empire is the Imperium of Man, but it is not evil like the 40k Imperium of Man. Rather, it is just a 1600s Holy Roman German Empire kind of thing. So not evil, just old. And it is ruled by the mortal emperor Karl Franz of the House of the Second Wilhelm. He is actually a good guy as emperors go and cares about his people, and he wields the warhammer for which the setting is named. Its dwarf name is Galmaraz, aka Skull Splitter. This mighty hammer was carried into battle by the Empire's founder, Sigmar Heldenhammer, 2,000 years before the novel we are reviewing today. The Imperium of Man worship Sigmar as a god, but they also worship other gods as well, and are totally opposed to chaos. And if you pick up the novel Drakenfels, you need to know none of that, as the novel is 100% understandable with zero prior knowledge, and that's a good thing, because Drachenfels was the first Warhammer novel ever published, and the reading public at the time, unless they were a tabletop gamer, would have never even heard of the setting. Drachenfels was written by Kim Stanley Newman and published 34 years ago in 1989, and for the first ever novel in any Warhammer setting, it not only is one of the very best Warhammer novels in general, it's one of the highest tier fantasy novels of all time, in my opinion at least. The writer deconstructs some tropes, parodies others, while taking the setting and characters seriously, and rebuilds these tropes as the novel plays out. The novel stars two epic quality characters, Dietlef Sarek, a playwright and actor, and Genevieve Dudon, a vampire! Oh yeah, Warhammer has vampires. The plot begins with the Prince Oswald von Königsberg and his band of adventurers, of which Genevieve is one of, attempting to take down the nefarious Dark Lord Drachenfels. This was released in 1989, and thus from that time to the end of the series, yes, Warhammer Fantasy did end. When they didn't sell enough models, G-Dubs decided to just nuke the whole setting, pretty much literally, and recreate it into the Age of Sigmar, but we need not worry about that right now. In any event, from the beginning to the end, there were a few retcons. Remarkably, much of what is in this novel was still canon at the end of the series, but Draki Boy kind of wasn't, but kind of was. Drachenfels in this novel is presented as the ultimate Dark Lord that tried to take over the Empire in its early years and had to be taken down by Sigmar himself. But after getting nuked by Sigmar, Drachenfels got better and continued his evil schemes, and basically used an army of the dead to terrorize the land. If you're a Warhammer fan, this sounds remarkably like the necromancer Nagash, and that's kind of who replaced Drachenfels, but Drak still kind of exists too, and even shows up in the Total War Warhammer games. So what we got is a battle. We don't see the end of that battle, Instead, we cut to 20 years in the future, and the battle has long since been won. We just don't know how. Otto is gathering the old band back together to celebrate the defeat of Drachenfels. We're then introduced to Detlef. He is currently living as an honored guest in a debtor's prison, because he created an epic play that went bust due to an outbreak of the plague, and now he owes over 100,000 gold crowns. And the novel focuses on this number to humorous effect. Detlef contemplates his long stay, and this is where some of the satire comes in, and it's remarkably tasteful. Detlef is a genius playwright and actor, and knows it, and he can be a bit of a dick about it, but has less of an ego than Tom Cruise, and only believes in a hammer-wielding man-god instead of Xenu. Detlef has standards, and even though he is offered a job to write jokes for a penny a line, he refuses cause, well, he might be in rags and eating porridge, but he still has his pride. Anytime Detlef is a viewpoint character, the snark goes up to 11 as he makes a lot of funny observations. Eventually, he is rescued from this peonage by Otto. Mr. von Koenigswald wants Detlef to make a play about his victory over Drachenfels. Detlef is more than happy to oblige. The first half of the novel gets the cast together and focuses on Detlef's play preparations, and it also introduces a few side characters such as Detlef's staff and Otto's old companions. It is learned that the play will be at Castle Drachenfels? Yeah, nothing weird about that. After the play stuff is all done, Detlef and his production company head out to the Castle of Happiness. And when they arrive, the novel turns into a horror/mystery story as Oswald's old companions start being found in various states of dismemberment. Can Detlef put on a play for the ages and survive opening night? Find out in Drakenfels. That's also the name of the play. Oh, this novel, ladies and gentlemen, is a treat. Especially when one considers the literary treacle that is released daily. When one finally reads a novel by a true wordsmith, it is a breath of fresh air. Mr. Newman can bloody well write, and all the characters are fleshed out in just a few lines. The plot is an original one, and the characters of Detlef and Genevieve show that fantasy heroes can be more than warriors or bloody hobbits. The best part of the novel is how real the characters feel. Detlef is a heroic character, but he can also be a snarky dick at times. But the novel shows that he is a generally caring man and will help those in need. I really like the part where he is in debtor's prison of Munson Keep, and he is at his lowest ebb, but he never whines about his lot, and I really love that Newman shows just how horrible 1600s life was, without getting edgy man with it. Vampire Genevieve is one of the best vampire characters I have yet read. She is very much a vampire, but she is a fairly nice woman, and the novel keeps her strong, but still real. She can be scared and unsure of herself, and she works with the characters instead of dominating them, and she maintains her heroism throughout. In later Warhammer stories, vampires are shown as evil through and through, and a little better than chaos. But here, vampires are kind of accepted. It's seen more as like kind of a mental illness in many respects. The novel even shows the bigotry of the time, as Detlef's best friend is mocked for being a dwarf. Not an actual dwarf, mind you, but a human with dwarfism, and he is mocked by humans and actual dwarfs alike. The friendship between the half-dude and Detlef is established in a few pages and has a great payoff in the end. Really, this novel was unexpectedly great. It has all the characterization and world building needed, but moves at a swift pace and gets everything done that it sets out to do. If you want to get started reading fantasy novels in general, this is one of the best places to start, and I'm not the only one who feels that Drakenfels is great, because Old G-Dub has kept this novel in print since 1989, and it is quite easy to get. So crack it open and see just how good fantasy can truly be. Bye, normies! So the best way we can describe this novel is William Shakespeare versus Sauron. Detlef is Shakespeare, and, well, Drachenfels is Sauron. And yes, they fight. So here's the good stuff. Once Detlef and co make it to the castle, weird shit starts happening, and ultimately most of Oswald's old adventuring party dies. The actress that is supposed to play Genevieve is a mean bitch, and eventually gets scared off, meaning Genevieve, a vampire, has to act as herself in a play. I told you this novel was imaginative. The night of the play has the actors super nervous, including Detlef, who is not only the director of the play, but also the main actor, as he chose the best part for himself, Oswald von Koenigswald. All of the nobles of the Empire are there, including Emperor Karl Franz and his son/heir. The characters in this novel are not stupid. One of the characters even remarks that the entire leadership of the Empire could be decapitated in a single stroke with one gunpowder bomb. The actor who is supposed to play Drakenfels is portrayed as a weird dude, but one that can act! So about as weird as, Tom Cruise. There are some segments where the Drakenfels actor acts like Jack the Ripper on some hapless victims, and at the end of the book he eats some eyeballs of Oswald's old party and then transforms into Drakenfels right during the finale. Drakenfels reveals himself right when an actor playing one of Oswald's old party members tries to attack him. In the play, the actor was supposed to hit a fake arm made of pig guts. The real Drakenfels rips the actor's real arm off. Ouch, even Jared Leto would say that was too much. This is when all the shit gets real. Oswald reveals himself as a villain and holds the Emperor hostage. The Emperor's son tries to fight and gets beat down. What's sad here is that the Emperor's son looked up to Oswald and, well, never meet your heroes, I guess. We learned that Oswald did not in fact beat the bastard Drachenfels. Instead, he literally cried like a little bitch. The well-bred and heroic-looking Oswald von Königswald just straight up started weeping when the big bad Dark Lord started beating the crap out of him. The Dark Lord Drakenfels offered him a deal: work with him to take over the Empire, or die. Guess which one old Ozzy chose? Detlef, despite being fantasy William Shakespeare, tries to fight and gets his ass handed to him. More brave than the prince, at least. Vampire Genevieve activates her primal powers and starts sucking Drakenfels off! Wait, that came out wrong. She goes super vampire mode and starts trying to suck out Drakenfels' lifeblood. That one is also sexual, but you get the idea. Drakenfels lets out a cry that shakes the building, but he regains his strength and then turns the tables on Genevieve and is about to suck out her vampire fluids. Damn, this is suggestive. He does this in order to fully resurrect as an unstoppable Dark Lord. But then, a humble, well, maybe not humble, but a playwright at least, finds a sledgehammer and his inner resolve and resolves to try and take down Drakenfels. Remember, Oswald cried like a little baby man, but Detlef, an overweight, overfed actor and playwright, fights to keep his friends alive, even though he knows he has no chance. That is a true hero. And because he's a true hero, he gets imbued by the power of Sigmar, or possibly Ulrich the Wolf God, and doth then he smite the demon. Yes, William Shakespeare gets imbued by the power of a fantasy god and beats the crap. No, that's not enough. The shit. No, that's still not enough. He beats the fuck out of Drakenfels and kills him once and for all. Holy crap, screw you, you boring hobbits. My unlikely hero will always be fantasy William Shakespeare. After this, the novel wraps up with all the characters that appeared getting their own send-offs. The good guys won, the bad guys lost, and it was all done with a bit of tongue-in-cheek humor, and just a tiny smidge of deconstruction. And in the end, Mr. Newman gave us a fun story to boot. So, in the novel, Detlef and Genevieve get together and have some fun times. Vampire Genevieve technically has a heartbeat, so it's not necrophilia. And at the end of the novel, they get together. And the final line of the novel is some great bittersweetness. Genevieve lived forever. Detlef did not. But it implies that they lived as happily ever after as possible until he died of old age. And that was Drakenfels, ladies and gentlemen, one of the most well-written and imaginative fantasy novels I've ever read. My only complaint is that Newman likes his lists, and lists off all sorts of shit. One entry would have been enough, Mr. Newman, but oh well. I love this novel because it's normal people fighting the baddies and living happily ever after at the end, without anything being lame or edgy. If you haven't read it in a while, you know what to do. I'm GeneralLotz, wishing you good Giant Slayer and good Brunner the Bounty Hunter, aka Fantasy Boba Fett, the real Boba Fett, whatever makes you happy. If you enjoyed this video, please consider subscribing, and please consider leaving a like or a comment, as the algorithm desires your soul. And I want to thank all those fans who have supported this channel, both past and present.